Hello and welcome back to Gunfighter Life, my fellow gunfighters, professional gunfighters, semi-pro gunfighters, aspiring gunfighters. I hope that all is well in your life. As always, I am your host, Michael Milito. First and foremost, I am a Christian. This podcast comes at gunfighting the right way from a Judeo-Christian worldview and values. If you don't like it, you can either deal with it or turn it off and listen to something else. But you would miss out on today's episode. Been thinking on this episode for a while, and it's kind of going through a metamorphosis in my head, but I think the final title is going to be something like Balancing Skill and Stuff. Because you see, I think both are important, and you can get really skewed one way or another. You could be the guy that wants the next, latest, greatest, super fancy VR with all the bells and whistles and thermo sights and a red dot with a magnifier and a red laser and a green laser and an IR laser and multi-position collapsible rotating bipod. It never goes out and shoots it, never gets any formal training, never goes to any competitions. Or you can be the guy with a single shot Hawkins rifled muzzleloader that thinks he can stand toe-to-toe with anybody with an AR. You can get skewed on one side of that balance or the other. Today's episode will be, where is that balance point? Before we get into the actual episode, though, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, leave a review of the podcast if you appreciate it, and if you want to, feel free to share this with somebody you think would find it beneficial. If you want to find out more, you can go to goodshepherdtraining.com. Instead of plugging all the different stuff, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. You can get a hold of me on there. You can check out more visual stuff on there, pictures, contact page, different things offered. With that, guys, get into a little bit of the bio. If you want to skip it, you can generally skip to around 4.5 minutes in. That should bring you, if not into, pretty close to into the main body, the subject of today's episode. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. It is first and foremost in my life, the greatest of all the commandments. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I don't apologize for that. I am an alpha male, and as such I follow the ultimate male, the ultimate alpha male, the greatest man that ever lived, Jesus Christ. A little bit about my background. In addition to that, I am a veteran. I've been to war. I served in both the United States Marine Corps in the infantry and the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Joined at 17, went to war more than once. I also served in law enforcement. I worked as a police officer in LAPD doing patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, tracking down fugitives and those kind of jobs. So by God's grace, I've made it through some nasty places and times overseas and some dangerous streets in the States. Not because I'm better than any of the men that didn't, but because God chose to have mercy and grace on me. To God be the glory. Also served as a private contractor for the U.S. government. For an agency I won't specify. By God's grace, He got me through all that. In addition to that, I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember, both rifle and pistol. Mostly pistol are most of my competition and championship wins. But I have also competed in, muzzleloader, archery, shotgun, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've been very blessed with those talents, and I try and use them and multiply them. I've done quite a bit of hunting and outdoor, I guess we'd say, survival-type activities, hunting and fishing all over this beautiful country. I have been a professional hunter and guide. Not many people today can see they've been a professional exotic and big game hunter of things like bison and exotic animals, but I have been one, and I'm very blessed for that. I've also gone out into the wilderness, by God's grace, with a Bible and a shotgun, and not just survived, but thrived. Also a professional firearms instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I was an urban warfare and desert warfare instructor under Mojave Viper. I'm also a FBI certified firearms instructor and have been for a lot of years. I'm certified by some other three-letter government agency. NRA certified instructor. And I have taught at one of the big-name firearms shooting academies in the country. So I've been very blessed to win many competitions and be a shooting instructor for military, law enforcement, and civilians. I have served as a commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a fairly large metropolitan area. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Psalm 144. With that, let's get into today's episode. Skills versus stuff. Now, let's start off with a little bit of philosophy. Let's be circumspect to consider. Use the logic and reason and brain God's given us to reckon through this together. Now, obviously, to be a gunfighter, one needs a gun. I don't think that anybody will argue that, let's make it real obvious. I don't think anybody would argue that a .44 Magnum, Smith & Wesson Model 29 6-shot revolver would be a better combat pistol, not hunting pistol, but combat pistol, than a SIG 320 with a red dot. But would you rather have somebody that just bought that 320 with a red dot and just went through their basic concealed carry training, backing you up in a gunfight? Or would you rather have Jerry Michalek with that Smith & Wesson Model 29 .44 Magnum? Kind of gives you some perspective, doesn't it? If you're in a dark alley somewhere and you call for backup, do you want a Navy SEAL showing up with a high point? Or do you want somebody who watches a lot of Netflix, eats a lot of Doritos, and hangs out in gun forums, and has the coolest, latest, greatest, brand new polymer striker fired gun that never even heard of? I don't even know about it. It's so cutting edge. Which one of those guys do you want backing you up? Now, obviously, in real life, it's probably not going to be that cut and dry. Most people are not carrying a Ford Smith & Wesson Model 29 .44 Magnum as their concealed carry gun, as their go-to fighting gun, their home defense gun. Here's the other side of that. Don't kid yourself into thinking that skill is going to make up for everything. Saying, my Smith & Wesson Model 29 .44 Magnum, that's a great gun, I'm not picking on it, I'm just using it because it's not a modern combat pistol. It's a great gun, it'd be a great hunting gun, it'd be a great hiking gun. But thinking, that's just as good, I can slow fire and make a nice tiny group at 7 yards when I go to the indoor range. That's just as good a fighting pistol as anything else. That's simply not the case. Even if you wanted to go with a revolver, and I've got a revolver in my pocket right now, one of my main go-to EDC guns is a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum, the 360 PD. Scandium frame, super light, super powerful. But that .44 mag, just the weight and the recoil alone is going to hinder you. Thinking that it's always training and there can never be a hardware solution is also crutch. And I'm going to call myself out here on this. I have been fighting getting a red dot on a handgun. Now, I've run them on rifles, obviously, not obviously to you, but I've been running them on rifles for a long time. It's a private contractor. I ran in iron sights my first tour in Iraq, and I ran in Trijicon ACOG my second tour in Iraq. But I have been bucking the trend to run a red dot on a pistol for probably a decade. Thought they had no place on a fighting combat handgun. And I kind of had to be real with myself and realize they are kind of the way of the future. I attended some pretty hardcore pistol training, some pretty heavy-hitting guys. The main guy there, last time I took class with me, he was running irons, and this time he was running a red dot. And as you heard, I was a commander of a tactical team. I let my guys run red dots. I don't think everybody should be letting me. I'm not that vain. It just wasn't for me. I heard about some of these tests that they do and some of the torture tests and talking about like turning the gun over and dropping it on the red dot and it being fine and holding zero and not breaking. I've seen plenty of iron sights that if you drop them, the front sight breaks or comes off. They're at least as sturdy as a red dot as I was. If they're at least as robust as iron sights and they make you faster and more accurate, why am I still bucking that trend? So kind of calling myself out that I was stubborn. Probably a decade. Probably really been viable for about 4 years. I've just been kind of troglodyte, just stuck in my ways. Recently bought one, put it on a 22 so I could get some training in it and get a bunch of reps in with it without breaking the bank, because we all know we're in the ammo apocalypse that started in, 2020 and still kind of continues to the present day. And I ran it seriously for 1 day, and I could see the advantages of it. Thankfully, I'm not so old and stuck in my ways that I don't see the wisdom and advantages of better gear. Likewise, I'll dime myself out. When I was younger and first let's just say I was a fairly new police officer and I went to a shooting competitions because I wanted to be better. And I thought, oh, I'm a cop. I'm a pretty competent handgun shooter. And I got freaking schooled going to those shooting competitions. I mean, average cop is nowhere near as good a shooter as the average competitive competition handgun shooter. And you can argue with that and disagree with that because you like cops or whatever. And I was a cop for a lot of my adult life. The average competitive handgun shooter is so much far and above that. There are police officers that are very good handgun shooters if they take the time and train on their own. They're part of a specialized unit, that's pretty much all they do. But realize that most of a cop's job has nothing to do with guns or gunfighting or anything like that. It's mostly an administrative role and paperwork. That's not what makes TV shows exciting or whatever, but talk to any cop and ask them how much paperwork they do. That's just a reality. But anyway, in the early days, in my competitions, I always thought that, oh, I got to get the next new thing, the next new thing, the next new thing. If my group was off one day to the right, I would knock my sight over to the right. If my group was off one day to the left, I would knock my sight over to the left. Instead of just focusing on the fundamentals and becoming a better shooter and shooting and running that gear hard until I reached the limit of that gear. And then once I realized that the gear was holding me back, the gear was the weak link, and I could take advantage of better gear, then upgrading, which I think is the right approach. So if you bought a Glock and you haven't ever even run a Glock and a Glock trigger, just heard that they're bad, and the first thing you do is go out and buy a better trigger, I would say, yes, Glocks come with a pretty horrible trigger, in my opinion. Run that thing until the trigger is holding you back and you can shoot better than it, and then upgrade the trigger. That would be my advice to you. You don't have to do that. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. You got the money. You can buy any fancy drop-in trigger, do any trigger job on it you want, as long as it's legal and within whatever policy you operate under. I have a very good friend, John. I don't think that's being too descriptive. He is also a fellow gunfighter. There's very few actual gunfighters I know in real life that I would consider an actual, legit gunfighter. Even some people I know that are employed as gunfighters, I don't know that I would consider them actual gunfighters. But I consider John to be one. And I had wanted an STI for probably 10 years. If you don't know what an STI is, it's a very nice double-stack 1911. I had wanted one of those for probably close to a decade. I had been wanting one of those. And I finally got one a couple years ago. My friend John, and he is a very good friend. He was running a Glock, and he's run a Glock, and he's run a 320. Texted me, I believe, yesterday, and he sent me a picture that he had gotten an STI. And he said that he felt like he had finally gotten to the point as a shooter he could take advantage of that gun. And this is not an exact quote, but something to that effect. And I really respect that about that he said that. It shows a lot of wisdom on his part, because this man's had a lot of guns. But he said he waited to get that gun until he could take full advantage of it. And that's what I'm talking about. Some other things to consider about modding versus not modding your gun. I'm not a car guy, but I understand this about buying cars. If you buy something and modify it like a car, you're generally not going to get out of it the money that you put into the accessories or the modification. The same generally is true for guns. Guns can be a very good, very safe, very worthwhile investment. You know, a Glock 19 might as well be a couple ounces of silver. They hold their value very well. Your best bet if it's an investment is to get that Glock, put it in a box, put it away, don't do any mods to it. Leave that little copper-colored packing grease in there, and if you want to resell it in a couple of years, chances are you'll get your money or more back out of it because of inflation. Now, if you start doing a stipple job to it and taking a Dremel to it, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do, if you start doing those things to improve the ergonomics of that gun, just realize when you go to sell it, you're going to get less for it. Because although a lot of people mod their Glocks in those ways, the chances of you finding somebody that wants a Glock modded in that way is very slim, and usually they want to do it themselves. So just realize that. Now, I don't know where I first heard this expression, but it's sure a good one and I'm going to use it. I'd give credit if I could remember. But it's don't look for a hardware solution to a software problem. If you have a flinch and you're pulling rounds low left, you need to fix that flinch before you try and find some doohickey or mechanism or gimmicky thing to fix that. You need to focus on the fundamentals. Every once in a while, it is your gear. Fix a problem, but if it's a software problem, you need a software solution, meaning fix yourself. Just a brief illustration of that. I have a recurve bow here in front of me. It does have sights on it, but it's a recurve bow. Practicing, I don't know, yesterday, a day or two ago, doesn't really matter. I was shooting, and I was shooting well, getting mostly bullseyes. Shot, and it was way off to the right. And I thought, oh, I must have thrown that one, and I shot another arrow, and it went right next to it, way over to the right. Well, that seemed good. I'm pretty decent at calling my shots, whether it's a bow or a pistol or a rifle or whatever. So I looked at my bow, and sure enough, the sight, I didn't know exactly where it was, but I knew what it was supposed to look like, and it was knocked way over. So inversely, you're not going to fix, I guess you could fix it with Kentucky windage, but you need the right solution for the right problem. If you have a software problem, you need a software solution. If you have a hardware problem, like something's broken or something's just not working, then you need that kind of solution. If you go to a shooting competition, pick the number one guy and get all his exact equipment, assuming it fits this person, and you give it to a novice person and have them run the exact same match, they're not going to get first place because they got the same gear. And I think there's a lot of that syndrome in the gun world and the gun culture. A lot of top competition shooters shoot STIs. There's a good reason they're fantastic guns. But if you think you getting an STI equals you being able to win a competition, no, you need the skill. Be able, like my good friend John said, you need to be able to take advantage of the accuracy, the speed, precision that weapon offers. One place that you can see this pretty clearly demonstrated is the different philosophies between American military of the past 50 years and the Russian military. Now, I really like the AK-47. It's a fantastic gun. But it has a lot of contrast with the AR-15. The M16 as it was adopted, yes, I know, in the military. The American military, or now the M4, is probably more common than the M16. That weapon, the AR, the M16, the M4, that family of weapons was designed for a professional, well-trained, standing army. Just look out what it takes to disassemble and reassemble that thing. All the little tiny parts. The AK, in contrast, was designed for a conscript army. People pressed into military service with much less military training. Look at the population and the size of Russia with all the different cultures and different languages. It was made for a conscript army. Now you should still clean and maintain and disassemble an AK-47. They're far easier and far simpler to disassemble and maintain. And here's the thing, even if you don't, the amount of them kicking around third world countries, Afghanistan, different places in Africa, they've been kicking around in those theaters for 50 years with mostly untrained users and still effective and still used, shows that philosophy of use. The fact that untrained forces put them to such good use shows their philosophy of use. The AR-15 can be a much more precise, much more accurate weapon. You're talking about a well-trained soldier, a well-trained Marine. When I was in the Marine Corps, we still shot iron sights when we went to qual. The expert, which by God's grace I qualified expert. We had to get hits on man-sized targets with iron sights with the M16 at 500 yards. I had done quite a bit of competition shooting before, precision rifle competition shooting before I joined the Marine Corps. That weapon can do that. There's a little bit more reach than the AK-47. Average conscript soldier that has very little to no training is going to be able to do that anyway. So does that weapon give any real advantage to them, and does it give quite a few disadvantages? What are you looking to do with it? What are you looking at it for? Like the AR, I just did an episode entitled America's Rifle, the AR. And I think it's a better platform if you're going to train with it hard, if you're going to know its idiosyncrasies, if you're going to know that it requires much more maintenance. Parts on it do wear out and break. If you know that and embrace that, you can wring more performance out of it. The reason most competition shooters run ARs. It's like an AK division or an AK match. Rare that you see AKs going toe-to-toe with ARs in competition. And like I said, unless they've got their own division. So which one's better for you? That really depends. A lot of preppers or a lot of survivalists, which I consider myself to be one, they really like the AK. I think it's a fantastic weapon. It does require less maintenance. Be honest with yourself. Are you going to train with it a bunch? Are you going to maintain it? Be able to take advantage of the added accuracy? If you take a well-trained sharpshooter expert rifleman, they can absolutely take advantage of those things. But if you put those both in the hands of a new shooter, flinching and closing their eyes when they pull the trigger. So the fact that the AR recovers faster than the AK is kind of a moot point for those people. It's going to be for somebody that's going to put it in their closet and maybe shoot it every couple years when their buddies get together and go out to the range. Maybe the AK is better for them because they aren't going to ring out the inherent benefits of the AR. Now, I'm not telling you what to get. If you want to support and you like the AR because it's American and it's American design and that's great. I'm talking about this from purely practical tactics standpoint. Maybe the AK would be better for that person. Obviously, if you're going to give it to somebody that's is not a gunfighter, is not going to train a ton, is not going to be that hardcore professional, then obviously the AK was made for what they call a conscript army. So that just illustrates what we're talking about here today, hardware versus software. You definitely can get advantages from good hardware, and I'm not begrudging you getting good stuff. I have a very nice Scar 17 sitting above my bed with a very nice Trijicon on it. I have 2 STIs because go-to fighting handgun. If it's your go-to of something, I think you should have 2. I'm not begrudging anybody good equipment. I encourage it. But I would encourage you to be honest with yourself and realize if it's a hardware problem or a software problem. You can see this in something demonstrated so clearly as a muzzle device. Like we talked about, the AR, the most common, or at least what I've been told is the most common, I don't know that for a fact, rifle in America. Most of them come with the military-style A2 flash hider. And that's fine. That's a perfectly good, perfectly serviceable, all-around flash hider. They cost like $10. Work pretty well. Does muzzle brake, reduce recoil, and muzzle climb better? A good, hardcore, PWS or other similar muzzle brake, reduce recoil, muzzle climb more? Yes, it certainly does. A good, fast, accurate shooter certainly can take advantage of that. But a brand new shooter, even if you take that A2 birdcage and screw it off and it's just a plain muzzle, and you put 2 rifles identical besides that, one's got no muzzle device on at all and one's got the best comp money can buy right next to each other, you give them to the new shooter, other than the sound signature when they pull the trigger, they probably aren't going to notice any difference at all. There's so much other things they've got to focus on. Have so far to go before they can really take advantage of that. It's kind of a moot point. So it reminds me of an old moto shirt, an old motivational shirt as we call it, back, I don't know. Probably still make this shirt, but I remember seeing it, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Just as a rough guess, I don't actually remember, but I was quite a bit younger, so it was a while ago. And it was a shirt I remember seeing, I believe, in the Marine Corps, and it said, "One mind, any weapon." Actually, now that I think about it, been the shirt of our instructors, or like combat instructors, hand-to-hand combat, knife combat, firearms training, but it said, "One mind, any weapon." Yeah, that's kind of a corny moto shirt, but that doesn't change the fact that motto is true. A skilled shooter is a skilled shooter. A skilled shooter can run an AK well, they can run an AR well, they can run a 1911 well, they can run a revolver well, they can run a Glock 19 well. Because they've mastered the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are kind of transient across all those platforms. They may be way more familiar with one than another. They may be way more familiar with a Glock than a revolver. Doesn't mean if they're a good shooter that they can't run both well, and they should be able to. The heart of a warrior is not the weapon. The heart of a warrior, we talked about Psalm 144, "Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle." The mindset, the mentality to be a warrior, something you're given, it's a gift. Weapon is just a tool. I'm a warrior first, then let's say if I'm an archer, if the string breaks on my bow, if I've got a just fight to win, I'll run up there with an arrow in my hand and stab the person, if that's all I got. Or I'll take the bow and beat them with it, if that's what needs to be done. The mindset to win the fight is more important. I'll keep that in mind. Like I said, I like stuff. I like American gun culture. I'm not a gun collector, but I enjoy the beauty of a beautiful firearm as much as a lot of people. I really enjoy that. But I just see the marketing and the hype of certain things, and I think a lot of people fall prey to thinking that is somehow going to make them a better warrior. It may help you take advantage of skills that you already possess. That's a good thing, but keep it in balance. Balance that stuff versus skill pendulum well. And we're all guilty of it. Like I said, I've been on both ends of it. But balance is part of being a good warrior, I believe. And this is just one of those aspects of that balance. With that, guys, thanks for listening to this kind of philosophical, hopefully made you think episode of Gunfighter Life. If you like this podcast, you may like a few others. The Alpha Male Podcast. It's about what it sounds like it's about. If you care about the important stuff, you can check out Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. You can find those all at goodshepherdtraining.com. You can also support us on there if you feel so inclined. Don't feel like you have to, but if you want to support this community you're now a part of, feel free. These podcasts are free to listen to, and I like it that way, but sadly they're not free to produce, either in time or in money. So if you do support, I really genuinely, honestly am humbled, and I thank you for it. If you'd like to, again, go check out Good Shepherd Training, scroll to the bottom, there'll be a thing on how to support if you want. An easy and free way. Like, subscribe, comment, and if you think somebody else would enjoy this podcast, share it with them. Also, thankfully, my wife's job went fully remote this month, which is great. And although I've really enjoyed being a professional gunfighter and leader of a tactical team here in Las Vegas, that's the metropolitan area I was talking about, I very much want to get out of Las Vegas. If you guys know of any job opportunities, I'm sure God will provide, but who knows, maybe He'll provide through one of the listeners. With that, guys, thanks for listening. Until next time, have a blessed day. Oh, I almost forgot the tactical tip. Here's one if you don't know it. Hopefully you have a shot timer if you're a serious shooter, but if you don't, you can generally download an app for free on your phone, which I guess is its own tactical tip, but not the one I'm going to talk about. You can download a shot timer app. You can usually on those apps or on your actual shot recorder device, your shot timer, you can set what's called a par time, so you'll get a first beep and a second beep. If you're doing something like practicing your draw and you want to get your draw under, 0.8, 0.8 of a second, you want to go from holster, not touching your gun, to shot on target in 0.8 seconds or less, your par time for 0.8 seconds, and you be honest with yourself and you practice, and when that hammer falls, I'm old school, most of my guns have hammers, my handguns anyway, but if you hear that click, that striker or that hammer fall before that second beep goes off, then you can call your shots, know your front sight was somewhere in the acceptable area of that target, then that was a hit in that allotted amount of time. You all know how ammo is right now, and that's a good tip to help you become a better, faster, more accurate, more reliable shooter. So there you go, guys. Thanks for listening to Gunfighter Life.